I was standing in the kitchen of our place in Austin when my phone died mid-call, the screen going black like it had somewhere better to be. I remember the quiet that followed, just the hum of the fridge and the low rattle of the AC fighting the Texas heat. I didn't think much of it. I just reached for the old laptop we kept on the counter, the one we barely used anymore. It booted slow. Always did. When the screen finally came to life, a message was already open. No password. No hesitation. Just a line sitting there like it had been waiting for me. Same time tonight. Don't park near Jake's place. Someone's starting to notice. I didn't scroll. Didn't check the sender. Didn't need to. Something in the wording, in the casual precision of it, told me everything I was supposed to understand, and nothing I could undo. I stood there with my hand resting on the counter, feeling the weight of the house around me. Same cabinets I'd installed myself. Same chipped tile near the sink. Same life I thought I knew down to the smallest detail. But it wasn't the same anymore. Not after that sentence. In that moment, there wasn't anger. Not yet. Just a kind of stillness, like something had been cut loose internally and hadn't hit the ground yet. I closed the laptop slowly. Not out of denial. Just because I already had what I came for. There wasn't anything left on that screen that could make it better. Or worse. That message didn't raise questions. It ended them. Before that message, life with Megan had a rhythm that didn't require thinking about. It just ran on its own. Weekdays were predictable. Up early, coffee in the same chipped mugs, a few quiet words before heading out. I worked long hours, steady work, nothing glamorous but consistent. She had her own routine, her own pace. We met in the evening somewhere in the middle, like we always had. Dinner was usually simple. Something grilled, something reheated. We'd sit across from each other, talk about small things, traffic, neighbors, something we saw online. Nothing heavy, nothing that hinted at anything breaking underneath. Weekends were louder. Backyard barbecues, the smell of smoke and cheap beer drifting over fences. That's where Jake and Sarah came in. They lived next door. Close enough to wave to, far enough not to think about much. Just another couple filling space in the neighborhood. Jake was easygoing. Talked a lot. Knew how to keep a conversation moving. Sarah was quieter, more observant. Megan got along with them well enough. Or at least, that's how it looked from the outside. Looking back, there were moments that didn't quite fit. Megan had these shifts. Some weeks, she'd be distant, like her attention was somewhere else entirely. Other times, she'd be overly present, talkative, energized, almost compensating for something I couldn't name. I didn't question it. People have moods. Stress shows up in different ways. Whenever Jake came up, though, there was tension. Not obvious. Not confrontational. Just a subtle tightening in her tone, like she didn't want to stay on the subject too long. I read it as simple dislike. Not everyone gets along. That's what I told myself. And because I believed everything had an explanation, I never looked for a different one. After that message, things didn't change all at once. They shifted quietly, like something slightly off in a structure you've walked through 100 times without noticing. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. I stopped explaining things away. Her yoga nights were the first pattern that settled into place. Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes Sundays. It sounded reasonable on the surface. Healthy. Routine. But when I lined it up in my head, those nights matched something else. Jake's truck not being in his driveway. I didn't check immediately. I just noticed. The next time she said she had a late session, I took the trash out a little slower than usual. Looked down the street without making it obvious. Jake's place was dark. No truck. No lights in the living room. That didn't prove anything on its own. But it didn't stand alone either. Her tone, when Sarah came up, started making more sense. It wasn't casual irritation. It had an edge to it, something personal. Something that didn't belong to surface-level dislike. I replayed conversations in my head. The way she'd dismiss Sarah too quickly. The way she'd redirect whenever Jake was mentioned. I stopped interrupting those moments. I let them happen. Her phone habits shifted too, once I started paying attention. Always angled away. Screen dimmed faster than necessary. Notifications cleared before I could glance over, even by accident. Not dramatic. Just controlled. I started noticing time differently. Gaps. Overlaps. Small inconsistencies that didn't matter before now carried weight. A quick errand that took longer than it should. A delayed reply that didn't match her explanation later. None of it was enough on its own. But together, it stopped looking like coincidence. It looked like a system. And once I understood that, I stopped trying to believe anything that didn't fit the pattern. I didn't confront her. That was the part most people wouldn't understand. There was no argument, no sudden shift in how I spoke to her, no late-night conversation where everything spilled out. On the outside, nothing changed. Same routine, same tone, same presence at the dinner table. But internally, something had already closed. It wasn't anger that settled in, not the kind that makes you raise your voice or demand answers. It was something quieter, more final. Like reaching the end of a calculation and realizing the result isn't going to change no matter how many times you run it again. I stopped trying to fix things I hadn't broken. That showed up in small ways first. I stopped asking follow-up questions when she mentioned plans. Stopped filling in silence with conversation. Let her explanations sit exactly as they were, without helping them make sense. Before, I would have bridged the gaps for her, smoothed over inconsistencies without even thinking about it. Now, I let them stand. And the more I stepped back, the clearer everything became. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. There was a point, late one evening, sitting in the living room while she moved around the kitchen, where it fully settled in. Not a realization, more like acceptance. This wasn't something you worked through. It wasn't temporary. It wasn't a misunderstanding waiting to be clarified. It was already done. I remember watching her from a distance, noticing how normal everything looked. The way she moved, the way she spoke, the way she carried on like the structure was still intact. That's when I understood something important. She was still operating inside the version of the relationship where I didn't know. And that gave me space. I didn't need to rush anything. There was no urgency anymore. Whatever this was, it had already crossed the point where reaction mattered. So I changed how I moved. Quieter, slower, more deliberate. Not to catch her, just to see clearly. Once I stopped reacting, I started seeing structure where there used to be noise. It wasn't about catching her doing something wrong. It was about understanding the rhythm she was already following. The routine underneath the routine. Her phone became predictable. Not the content, I never touched it, but the timing. Messages that came in clusters, then silence. Quick replies when she thought I wasn't paying attention, slower ones when I was in the room. The way she'd shift slightly, turning her body just enough to create privacy without making it obvious. Her schedule lined up cleaner the longer I watched it. Working late stopped sounding like an excuse and started functioning like a marker. Those nights almost always matched the same thing. Jake's truck gone, his house dark, no movement on their side of the fence. It wasn't every time, but it didn't need to be. It was consistent enough. I started keeping it in my head. Dates, times, small details. Not written down, just organized. Like tracking materials on a job site. What came in, what went out, what didn't add up. Sarah changed too. At first, it was subtle. Less time outside. Fewer conversations over the fence. When she did speak, there was tension in it. Like she was holding something back or trying not to look too closely at something she already suspected. We never discussed it. But there were moments, brief ones, where we crossed paths and there was an understanding that didn't need words. Not agreement. Not confirmation. Just awareness. I didn't approach her. That wasn't my role. This wasn't about exposing anything. It was about letting things show themselves fully. Megan stayed consistent in her own way. Same explanations, same patterns, same confidence in how everything was presented. She didn't adjust much, which told me something else. She didn't think she needed to. And that gave me more time. I didn't interrupt the process. I didn't test anything. I didn't push for clarity. I let the pattern continue. Because the longer it ran uninterrupted, the clearer it became where it would eventually break on its own. It shifted from something private to something structural the moment I realized Megan wasn't just sharing time. She was sharing information. It happened casually. One evening, she mentioned something about her savings account. Not in detail, not directly, but enough to signal that parts of our finances had become conversation outside the house. The way she said it didn't match how we usually handled money. It felt rehearsed, detached. That's when the situation stopped being contained. Up until then, I had treated it as a personal failure of the relationship. Something isolated between two people making decisions behind closed doors. But finances don't stay contained. Once that line is crossed, it changes the scope entirely. I didn't confront her about it. Instead, I scheduled a consultation. The lawyer's office was quiet, efficient. No emotion attached to any of it. I laid out what I knew, not speculation, just patterns, timelines, observations. He didn't interrupt much, just asked for clarification where it mattered. What are you looking to do? He asked. Prepare, I said. That was enough. We went over assets, accounts, ownership structures. What was joint, what wasn't. What could be separated quietly, and what required formal steps. There was no urgency in his tone, which worked in my favor. It meant I had time to move carefully. I didn't make any sudden changes. Just small adjustments. Access points reviewed. Statements downloaded. Copies stored where they needed to be. Nothing that would trigger attention. Nothing that would shift the surface. At the same time, something else developed. Unspoken, but present. Sarah and I crossed paths more often. Not deliberately. Just in the natural overlap of two houses sharing space. Conversations stayed neutral. Brief. But the pauses carried weight. One evening, she held eye contact a second longer than usual. That was enough. There was no agreement. No coordination. Just a shared understanding that whatever had been hidden was no longer contained to one side of the fence. And that meant it would eventually surface on both. The conversation didn't happen the way most people expect those things to happen. There was no setup, no late-night tension building toward a breaking point. It unfolded in the middle of something ordinary. A Saturday afternoon. Backyard barbecue. Same as always. Grill going. Music low. A few neighbors drifting in and out of conversation. The kind of setting where everything looks stable from the outside. I stayed in my usual place, near the edge of it. Not withdrawn, not engaged, just present enough to avoid attention. Megan moved through the yard like she always did. Comfortable. Controlled. No sign that anything had shifted. Jake showed up late. That alone didn't stand out to anyone else. But I noticed the timing. The way Megan registered it without looking directly at him. The slight adjustment in her posture. Small things. Consistent with everything I'd already seen. Sarah was quieter than usual. Kept to herself more. Watched more than she spoke. The moment came without warning. Megan walked over to me while I was standing near the fence line. Casual approach. Neutral expression. Like she was stepping into a conversation she assumed she already understood. Can we talk for a second? She said. I nodded. We stepped a few feet away. Not isolated, but just enough space to lower the volume. She looked at me like she was checking for something. Maybe a reaction she expected to see. You've been off, she said. Is something going on? I held her gaze. Steady. No change in tone. I caught my wife with our neighbor, I said. I stayed quiet until the right moment. No emphasis. No pause for effect. Just the statement. She blinked once. Then again. Processing. That's not funny, she said quickly. Too quickly. I'm not trying to be. Her posture shifted. Slight tension in her shoulders. Her eyes moved for a fraction of a second, past me, toward the yard, toward Jake. That's a serious accusation, she said. You don't even know what you're saying. I didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't repeat it. I just stayed where I was. And for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't know how to step back into control of the conversation. That was enough. After that, I didn't say anything else. I didn't clarify, didn't expand, didn't follow her when she stepped back toward the yard like she needed space to reorganize herself. I just stayed where I was, letting the moment settle into everything around it. That was the last time I tried to control any part of it. From that point on, things started moving without me. Megan didn't approach me again that afternoon. She stayed closer to the group, her tone slightly sharper, her movements a little more measured. Subtle shifts, but noticeable if you were already watching for them. Jake changed too. He kept his distance more than usual. Conversations that would normally stretch out were cut short. He checked his phone more often, like he was waiting for something or trying to avoid something at the same time. Sarah didn't adjust. If anything, she became more direct. Still quiet, still controlled, but present in a way she hadn't been before. She watched both of them without trying to hide it. That's when the balance started to shift. Not because of anything I said. Because the structure they were relying on, secrecy, routine, control, had been interrupted just enough to make it unstable. Over the next few days, I stayed consistent. Same schedule, same tone, no follow-up questions, no pressure. I didn't give Megan anything to react against. And without that, she started adjusting on her own. Explanations became longer, less precise. She'd add details that didn't match previous ones. Small corrections mid-sentence. The kind of things you only notice when you're no longer trying to believe them. Jake's presence around the house dropped off almost entirely. His truck was gone more often, but not in the same pattern as before. Less predictable, less coordinated. Sarah stopped staying quiet. Not publicly, not directly, but she stopped covering for anything. Conversations with neighbors carried a different tone. Less protective, more open-ended. Megan tried to regain control of the narrative. I could see it in how she spoke, framing things differently, redirecting attention, acting like nothing had fundamentally changed. But it didn't hold, because I wasn't participating anymore. And without that, everything they were holding together started separating on its own. Megan didn't leave all at once. There was no single moment where everything was packed and gone, no final argument that marked a clear end. It happened gradually, one drawer at a time. A few boxes moved into her car, then another trip the next day. Small removals that didn't interrupt the surface of the house, but slowly emptied it. We didn't discuss it. Not directly. Conversations narrowed down to logistics. Timing. Access. What needed to be signed, what needed to be separated. The tone stayed, even on both sides. No raised voices. No attempts to revisit anything that had already passed the point of explanation. By then, there wasn't anything left to clarify. Jake stopped coming around completely. His house stayed quiet more often than not. When his truck was there, it stayed parked. No overlap. No visible interaction. Whatever had existed between them didn't carry over once it was no longer hidden. Sarah made her own adjustments. She was outside more. Not social, not open, but present. Like someone reclaiming space that had been uncertain before. We exchanged a few words here and there, nothing substantial. Just acknowledgement. That was enough. Inside the house, the difference became more noticeable with each day. Less movement, less noise, fewer things out of place. The absence didn't feel sudden. It felt earned, like something that had already been gone for a while was finally catching up to reality. I didn't rush the process. Everything moved at a pace that matched the situation. Legal steps were handled cleanly. Accounts separated where they needed to be. No resistance. No last-minute complications. Megan didn't push back. Whatever version of control she had been operating under before, it didn't apply anymore. There wasn't a position to return to. The last of her things left on a weekday morning. No conversation. Just the sound of the door closing behind her. And then the house stayed still. Not empty. Just settled. For the first time in a long while, nothing in it felt uncertain. The house didn't feel different at first. Same walls. Same layout. Same morning light coming through the kitchen window at the same angle. But the weight of it had changed. There was no tension sitting underneath the routine anymore. No second layer to read into. Just what was there. I didn't try to replace anything. Didn't rearrange the space or fill it with noise. I kept things as they were and let the quiet settle naturally. It wasn't empty, it was clear. That was the difference. I didn't get back what I thought I had before. That part was already gone long before I found that message. What I got instead was something more stable. Clarity. No guessing. No adjusting to someone else's version of things. No carrying something that didn't belong to me anymore. I stopped looking for explanations. Stopped revisiting timelines. Stopped trying to understand something that had already shown me exactly what it was. And once I did that, moving forward didn't require effort. It just happened. Not all at once, but steady. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.